Greetings gamers and welcome to the inaugural edition of Yeah, I've Played, a bit of a companion piece to our other show, Have You Played? Now, usually in that show when we present the question to one another, have you played such and such game? The answer is usually a resounding no. Or, yeah, but it was like 12 years ago.
At my friend's house, and he wasn't home, just his grandmother let me in.
Yeah.
Yes, but in this new show, Matt and I have chosen a specific title, given ourselves a date and time to complete the game, have the same experience, and then discuss those experiences with our experience.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And today, we are Matthew Hall and
Andrew Taylor.
we are discussing Hellblade, Senua's
Sacrifice.
You remembered the name of the game for once.
For the first time, I said Senua's
Journey, Sanctity,
Adventure,
Revenge,
Redemption, Resurrection, but indeed it was Sacrifice.
Senua's Sacrifice is a game about a woman who opens a lot of doors. Hellblade was released in 2017. It was developed and published by the same studio, Ninja Theory. And they're a small studio, they're British. And we're just going to break down the game, kind of go from the top to the bottom and talk about our experience with the game.
With Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. I remember when this game came out, I feel like it was making waves, making a lot of splishes and splashes. I remember hearing about it a lot and how it wasn't like other games. It was its kind of own unique experience. For some reason, I incorrectly thought that it was a game that came out almost as a launch title, and a lot of people were kind of attributing it to being sort of a tech demo for that system, but I guess that's not true. You said it came out on PC a year before it came out on consoles?
And a year later, it came out on the Switch. No, I think what you're remembering is just that people are saying it's a very visually and technically impressive game, especially for such a small dev team.
Yeah, I'm just mixing those two things together. So I remember hearing about this game a lot. Do you remember hearing about it when it came out? Or
Yeah,
not?
and I also actually started this game, I want to say, close to when it dropped on Xbox. I think it came out on Game Pass pretty soon afterward, or I may have even purchased it in a sale. Either way, I had it on my Xbox console for a very long time. I started it, I never finished it, I never got very far past the opening sequence.
What stopped you that first time?
I don't really have a good answer for that.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. We played it now, so
We did play
let's
it
just
now.
get into it.
All right.
That opening sequence on the boat, you mentioned to me previously, we did talk about this a little bit.
A little bit last night.
We were both having the same weird glitch where like it almost seemed like it was just,
There was some stuttering.
it was very,
and
but
fidgeting.
stuttering of the model of the canoe, right?
The canoe was jumping around, and for me, I think Dillion's head, which is a part of something that Senua was carrying, and her little hood or collar was like doing this weird bouncing stuff, and it was confusing, and I almost restarted the game because I thought that was like clearly it wasn't intentional. But if you had that same experience, then maybe it's something that they just kind of left in.
I'm assuming it's just a bug.
Yeah, I saw
I didn't see it happen on the Xbox version to my memory.
Oh, okay. I don't remember seeing it really anywhere else, but I did have that weird little bump.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that was not just me. But,
So the game opens up, or what do you want to say?
that did ruin the entire game experience for me. As a PC gamer, I expect excellence and perfection for my games, so I'm sorry to say Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice gets a 0 out of 10.
Well, you've heard it from Andrew, but let me tell you what I thought.
The rest of the video is just Matt talking.
So the game opens up, and Senua is on a little canoe, and she's paddling through, and she's looking at the opening credits crawl.
She's checking them out. It's cool. It's kind of, they do like the credits are in the world, and they kind of like pan by with you.
Yeah, it's very similar to the opening of Prey.
Yeah.
Where they kind of just bake them right into the environment. So Senua, to put it simply, Senua's on a sort of like spirit quest. She's a Viking, and she's suffering from severe psychosis.
Yes, and the way... Is that always what psychosis is? Is it always, you hear voices, is that what psychosis is?
I don't really think it's the same for everybody, but I think there's different levels of severity, and they do discuss it in some of the supplemental materials that come with the game. But essentially it's, she's suffering from both auditory and visual hallucinations that she can't really always parse out from reality.
Right. That manifests most probably noticeably with the multiple voices that Senua hears in her head concurrently. They have their own kind of, they don't have names or anything, but I think there's 3 different female voices and a couple male voices. And they all have their own personalities.
Yeah.
They all, and they're dynamic. It's not always one thing, but you hear them instantly in the beginning of the game. That's why the game recommends that you use headphones.
Yeah.
To get that, kind of stereo panning effect and everything. And I did play the game all the way through with headphones. You said you did as well?
I played through most of it with headphones, yeah.
When games recommend that, I'm always like, But this game really, it feels like the experience is boosted by wearing headphones. I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it is... I mean, the whole, I think, impetus of the design is to put the player in that state of psychosis as much as possible for someone who, isn't necessarily suffering from it in reality.
And I think we'll get more into that later, but I felt that was successful.
Yeah, I'd say so.
The world of Senua really unfolds slowly and gradually as you get deeper into it, as you experience different cutscenes. Her backstory and her journey and mission become clearer and more into focus. So she's paddling down the little rowboat, and you discover that she's making her way to a place called Hell, which is essentially the same idea as hell to us good Christian boys.
Yeah, you might like Helheim, or it's hell. It's Hel, but
Same
that's
kind of parallels.
where her lover Dillian, I believe his remains or part of his remains or his soul are there. She's trying to reunite his severed head with his soul so he can be at peace and rest.
She believes that Hela, the goddess, the master of the domain of hell,
Master of Hell.
the master of hell is, keeping his soul for herself until she reunites the bodies, the pieces of his body together to then free him and bring him to...
It seems like you don't entirely understand what was going on.
No, I do. I just, I'm struggling to use the correct terminology.
Right.
I almost said
I get the gist of it. She's trying to bring the head to hell to ease Dillian's suffering and release his soul.
I almost said Sovereign Guard, but that's Skyrim.
Right. But even
Isengard,
even the specifics of it, like at one point I thought that his remains were there, and then I thought she had to like bring his head to the rest of his body.
Because she does have a severed head on her person at all times. But
she's just bringing it to hell.
That part was
this is what I'm trying to say, is like I know the gist of it. The specifics, even the whole...
I see what you mean,
through the whole story, it was like, okay, if this was like a specific task that I had to complete, where it was like, put the head on this place to do the magic to make his soul feel good, I would have no idea what she was technically, specifically trying to accomplish, other than help her lover get through to the afterlife in peace.
Help him get better, yeah. There was a couple question marks, and that's something that I wanted to check with you, specifically later on. In the beginning of a game, I kind of just resolve myself to being like, I don't know what's going on. I'm sure, like, after I complete a game, if I come back to the beginning, I'll be like, oh, this is so obvious. But I'm just like, I don't understand. I'm just going to keep, rowing my boat.
Yeah.
And where does it go from there?
Well, it goes into quite a few places, but
yeah.
You do eventually kind of like get an encounter with a dead warrior. Is that Dillian? See, this is what was confusing to me.
Just
because she was having flashbacks where she was talking to Dillian.
Yes.
But then there was also like another dead Viking warrior who was like, I've been on the same path. I'll help guide you.
Yes.
That wasn't Dillian.
That was not Dillian, I don't think.
What was that guy's name?
His name was Druth. Druth.
Druth, right. Okay. That was a little confusing to me at first, too, because sometimes it wasn't totally clear who she was talking to in her flashbacks.
Yeah, I believe a majority of the time the male voice that you hear is Druth, who I believe...
She made up.
It's very difficult to say. I do remember the plot points and his backstory, because he tells you at one point
Yeah.
deeper in the game, and maybe we'll wait to get there. But he could have been entirely made up. He could have been a figment of her imagination.
This entire thing could have been made up, and
It really
that is
was.
kind of the point. So essentially, you are just rowing, and that's kind of giving you the exposition. You're going through this river of the dead, and you know it's a nice scene. And then when you finally get to land, eventually, you're kind of faced with a trial, like a combat trial.
Yes.
And so this is kind of like where you start to understand the game has 3 distinct sort of parts, which are exploration, puzzle solving, and combat. And
Yeah.
there's like a clear, like, oh, I'm in a puzzle now.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in combat now.
There's-
Oh, I'm walking through this area to get to the next puzzle or combat section.
They feel very... It's very clear to you which thing you're doing at that moment.
Yeah, and that it doesn't feel bad, but it's the kind of thing where I feel like I'm able to fully take in whatever it is that's going on. Like, I don't think, other than maybe 1 or 2 times, I never felt like surprised by a combat encounter.
No, for the most part, it was never sprung on me. Sometimes I'd be like trying to run through a section, and then I realized like, oh wait, what? And then it's like, oh, we're doing combat now.
They all kind of take place in,
A little like arena.
yeah, a little circle.
A little circle.
And I like that. So essentially the combat is, you know, a parry-based sort of system of hard attack or heavy attack and light attack.
And dodging.
And you have a dodge roll, and then you can also like block and parry stuff.
That is correct, Matt, but there's a huge element to the combat that both Matt and I did not realize until maybe beyond halfway through the game.
Right, so the first battle you get into, and this only made sense to me after this was at, I didn't notice this until the very end of the first boss battle.
Okay.
But in the very first battle, I died the first
Really?
time I was in combat.
Okay.
And I didn't understand why. And I did fine the second time. But at one point, you're kind of like locking swords with this person, and the voices are telling you, focus, focus, focus.
Yes.
And so in the game, similar to Tomb Raider or Quantum Break or some of the other games, even like Arkham Asylum, you know, you have like a focus button that kind of like highlights different waypoints or markers in the environment, and but also in combat use that same focus ability
You can use that same focus
to slow down time.
It brings you into like a bullet time style deal.
And it seems
where
like
you still are faster than everyone else, but everyone else seems to slow down.
Yeah.
And they play with that a little bit as the game goes on.
And it seems like you're maybe not impervious to attack, but it seems like you're stronger. You seems like you have some sort of stat boost.
I would agree with that. I feel like some guys you could sometimes take them out with like 2 heavy hits.
Yeah, or a single hit sometimes. Some of the weaker enemies. I was just like, there was one section in particular I remember where I was just like slash spin and taking out a
just
room of guys. It
destroying
felt
everyone.
powerful.
That was very cool.
But I didn't understand the prompt when the voices were saying focus. I was like, okay, I'll focus on beating this guy.
Neither of us realized that was a mechanic at that point.
And
we
so-
knew it was in the rest of the game.
You have like a little pouch on your side that has a little rune on it.
That's actually your mirror. That was a mirror that was supposed to have been given to you by Druth, I believe, to show you, like, I don't know, I think to center yourself, you're supposed to look into the mirror, but that's the only element of a HUD that you really have in the game.
Okay, so it eventually, throughout battles, it lights up, and that means that your slowdown power has recharged.
And I believe you fill it up by fighting.
Yeah, I think so.
If you just wait, you will not generate it, I don't think.
And so the 2 things that just because we're talking about the combat that were really shitty for me was that it did give you a little bit of tutorial, I believe. Maybe it didn't.
I don't remember it telling me how to fight at all.
It would have been nice if there was just like 1 or 2 prompts to like be like, hey, you have a light and heavy attacks and also a dodge. I didn't know you could dodge.
Really? So you're just trying to focus on like
because the
blocking
thing
and
is,
stuff?
when you go into combat in this game, like the camera changes, you're locked in, and all you can kind of do is like you lock on to enemies. It's like a lock-on based combat system.
It's like Ocarina of Time or any game like that. Like,
similar.
The Z button is always being pressed.
But even in those games, you can
can't
kind of
even-
like run away.
Yeah,
you
can't break.
No, you're
that
locked
lock on.
into combat, and
All you can do is switch to other guys.
So the thing that was like confusing for me was like I didn't get a chance to even understand that like the gameplay mechanics had switched because your abilities are different in combat mode than they are when you're walking around.
That's usually denoted by Senua will pull out her sword and she has a different stance. And I think the camera's a little bit different.
And you get, it's very clear, but what wasn't clear to me was, oh, now all the buttons do different things and here are your abilities. I had to like stop halfway through the game and like pause and read the options, like the control layout, and be like, oh, there's dodge and all this stuff. Like, because the game was just like, here you go, here's your first fight. And even just like any kind of heads up, because you spent like the first 10, 15 minutes getting used to a certain button layout,
I think you're just
and then it switched.
walking, like for the most part, before the beginning, which is fine. It was a little bit of a jarring thing. I think what gave me an advantage is that I paused the game a couple times just to do other stuff before I got to that first combat. And when you pause it, and on the pause screen, without having to go into a menu, it does display the combat controls. Heavy, light attack, dodge, and all that stuff. I saw that, I was like, oh, that might come in handy later. And I kind of like familiarized myself with it before I got into that first fight. But maybe that didn't happen to you?
No, there should be, I do think in games like that where different scenarios are going to have different controls, basically, it should be a little heads up somewhere. Yeah. I know they're trying to do a very immersive thing where...
There is no HUD.
There's no HUD. You pretty much have your, I'm going into combat because I'm pulling my sword out, or I'm looking for puzzles because I'm looking for puzzles.
Yeah.
And you have your little light up mirror, which I didn't even realize it was a mirror. I remember him...
It's like a piece of reflective bronze or something.
Yeah, but I thought it was just a little pouch because I didn't even notice it until way later. Like I said,
also has a little pouch.
Yeah.
I think it's important to mention when we talk about the combat too is that I believe by default the game is on an auto difficulty for the combat, and that I want to get into that more later because in some of the late game it really messed me up, but.
It messed me up too.
It messed you up too. You don't change. You don't choose your difficulty. You can, but it's by default. It's on this auto selection, which is interesting. But I'll tell you. We'll talk about the quirks of that later.
So when you inevitably hit your first death, you find out that there's a sort of rot, like black rot, darkness, which is like a physical manifestation of Senua's psychosis that starts at her, I think her right hand.
Yeah.
And it creeps up her arm. And the game tells you that if you, and this is also the kind of thing where it's like, okay, so the game can display on-screen messages when it wants to.
Yeah.
So it could have given me a heads up, like, hey, control layout's going to change. But regardless, if it reaches her head, you'll get a permanent game over.
Yeah, it implied, I don't remember what the exact terms that they used, but it implied that if you died or made enough mistakes, I think is what it said, that your save file would be deleted. And you'd have to begin the journey again.
Right, permanent game over, yeah. You would lose all progress. You would not be able to start over. And every time you die, it creeps up a little bit more up her arm. And I got to where it was like at her neck through my playthrough. The thing I didn't do for myself was spoil the game and find out that it's a lie.
We hate to drop this bomb on you because I think the intention behind this bluff, it is a bluff, is interesting because they want you to be more immersed. Like, oh man, like I don't want Senua to like fall to this corruption.
Yes, but also I think it's supposed to make you anxious.
Which is
part of the game is putting you in a uncertain, anxious state.
Yes, and I think it's helpful to that, but it is also like, since it is hollow, I don't know, I was afraid because I got to a point that I think we'll talk about soon because I had a very negative experience with one part of this game that kind of colored the rest of it for me, and I had to
we'll get to that very shortly.
Yes. I was dying a lot. And I was like, oh man, I've died so many times on this one part. I don't want to get past this, then die one more time, and then have to restart. So I searched it. I'm like, is there the permadeath in Senua? Is it real? And everyone was like, no, it's not real. And I was like, oh, okay. So that started giving me a couple question marks. I feel bad even talking about that though, because I want that to be a successful element of the game. Do you think that's a good mechanic, like kind of like thing to hang over your head? The threat of permadeath makes you feel something.
I would say no, only because it's great on paper, but in terms of and this was a very successful game, so fuck me, whatever.
Yeah.
But I would say no, because the idea of permadeath is a thing that, like, I know for a lot of gamers, they're just like, oh, I could lose my character. I don't, not even playing games like, different roguelites or anything where there's permadeath in those games.
Yeah. But usually, a lot of times that's in like you play the hardcore mode, or it's like the permadeath mode.
Yeah.
You're aware of it.
But that being like the default thing, I know that's a big turnoff for a lot of players, like right off the bat.
For sure.
And you only find out about it after you've already failed one time.
Yeah.
So you're already invested in the game, and then once you fail for the first time,
like, oh man.
Like you're like, oh well, do I even want to go forward with this? Like, that fucking sucks. I could lose all my progress. And the only reason I thought that it was real is because I know the game is relatively short by modern standards.
Yeah, it was. I think I put in 9 hours total.
I put in just about 8.
Yeah, because you're 1 hour better than I am at games.
Yes.
So I think at best, if it works for somebody, it's a cool, like, oh man, I'm anxious. I want to make sure, I want to get through this. I want to see Senua, not fall to the darkness. I want her to keep going. But at worst, and I think it's happened to a lot of people, like, oh man, I don't want to lose my save file. Is this going to be like a Dark Souls game? Like, is this going to be a lot harder than I anticipated? And that might be a turnoff.
Totally. Oh well, it's the choice they made.
They tried it.
Well, moving on, the first sort of thing you face are 2 doors. 2 different paths that you can take, and you need to go through each door to obtain a thing so you can open the 3rd door.
Yes. So there's a little bit.
So there's 3 doors. I said only 2 doors. There's 3 doors. Only 2 doors you can operate.
Matt got really into the game, so he likes doing the deception in real life as well.
Yes. So there's either the illusion trials or the fire trials. Which trial did you go through first?
I began with the fire trials.
And you found it to be very difficult.
Yes.
That's funny because I thought it was wicked easy, and I had a lot of trouble with the illusion trials.
I didn't have any trouble with the illusion trials.
Do you think it's simply because it's like an awkward game to get started in, and once you got past your first hump, you were just better at the game?
Yes. So, all right. So the experience that I had with the fire trials, and this, so each trial that you go through, there's a couple of them in the game. Ultimately, your goal is to get to that Norse god of whatever that trial may be. For the fire god, and I don't remember all of them, it was Surt, the god of fire in Norse mythology.
And just real quick, the way it works is essentially once you enter an area,
you're locked into it.
You're locked into it. And this is, why I mentioned that it's a game about a woman who opens doors. You're essentially just trying to open a bunch of doors.
That's a good,
throughout these trials.
That's very true.
There's runes drawn on the doors, and you have to focus on the runes on the door, and then you have to find physical representations of the runes in the environment, focus on them, and kind of use your mind powers to like launch that sigil and use it to activate the rune that's on the door, and once you've activated all the runes on the door will open. That's the bulk of the game.
That is a large... I think I spent more time doing that than anything else in the game.
Did you play Arkham Asylum?
No, but I've watched a lot of people play it before.
Well, there's a very similar thing with the Riddler. This game just reminds me a lot of Arkham. That's why I'm bringing it up, because in addition to like the sensory stuff and the focus and everything, and not exactly the combat, but in some ways, the sort of like parry, dodge based, light, heavy attack, simple combat.
Right.
There's these perspective puzzles where the Riddler has like left sort of question marks throughout the environment, and you can see the top of one or the bottom of one, and you need to like shift your perspective in such a way that it forms a complete image.
Yes.
There's perspective puzzles all throughout this game, and that's a big part of finding the runes.
Yeah, in Senua, that's the main part of finding the runes for the majority of the game.
But the fire trial is largely also built around the presence of flames.
Yes,
so
there's a lot of flames, and there's puzzles.
So tell me about your experience with the fire trials.
Yeah, I just wanted to fix my glasses.
All right, now I'm going to take a sip of my drink.
In addition to finding the runes to open the doors in the fire trials, each one has like 2 things. Like in this one, the 2 different things that you have to do. In addition to the runes, there's another challenge in these that progresses you between the different areas, where you find a door that's also locked, and you have to then find a totem. When you press the totem, that like activates this kind of like almost like a jump back in time to when this place was ravaged by fire or maybe pillaging. When you activate the rune, you have a set amount of time before you die from either asphyxiation, breathing, smoke inhalation, or literally the flames, where you have to run to that door and get through the gate before you die. You have to do that a couple times to get to the different sections before you finally face Cert at the end.
Yeah, that's kind of how the fire trial part works, is you're rushing through these little fire mazes.
Yes. It seems pretty self-explanatory, and maybe it is, but I hit this one really tough snag where I was doing one of those trials where you have to, press the totem and get to the door.
You press the totem, activates the flames. You're having a flame hallucination, essentially.
Yeah. You have to dodge the fire, dodge the burning corpses.
Yeah,
There's all this screaming. It's
there's parts like that in a lot of games where it's like, get through the fiery part without getting hurt.
Without dying. I got to this one section where Druth is yelling at you. He says something like, "I never stopped running, Senua. That was my thing. That's how I made it to where I got. It's because I never stopped fighting. You have to keep running no matter what." And I should have taken that a lot more literally than it was. But this game does deception. You know what I mean? You never know what to really listen to. You run up this little hill to where the gate is at the top. The gate you have to get through to be safe. When you get there, like halfway up, this giant plume of flame bursts out of the door. And if you run towards it too fast, or if you run towards it, you caught on fire. You catch on fire, and Senua was actually on fire, and you die pretty quickly. So I died by that once, and I was like, oh, okay, crap. I gotta wait right there for the flame to pass me by, and then I'll run through, and I see that it's right there. The second time, I waited for the explosion. I was okay. I ran through, and I died again. I died from smoke inhalation. She just falls over and dies. I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't do it fast enough. I tried it again, and I died from smoke inhalation again. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I'm like, is this not the right place? So I exhausted every effort. I spent maybe like
3 minutes.
3 whole minutes playing this one same part over and over again. Can you imagine? No, I spent a long time trial and erroring this part because I'm like, what the hell is going on? But it's because I got it in my head with that first death that running through the fire is not what you're supposed to do, because I died.
It is what you're supposed to do, though, right?
It is what you're supposed to do. As it turns out, in accordance with what Druth is yelling to you, he's saying, keep running, Senua. You're supposed to run through the fire, you catch on fire, but you keep running. I don't even think you can let go of the button. You have to continue running the entire way. Before you die, you will make it to the next area, the safe area that you need to get to. And then it plays a cutscene where Senua, all her skin's burned off, but then the game progresses. It's what you're supposed to do. Because I died that first time, I thought that wasn't an option. So I spent so much time like, what the fuck do I do? Exhausting
so you just
every
happened
option.
to die probably because you weren't fast enough.
Yeah, maybe I let go of the button and I looked around for a second. It was my fault. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't my fault. But since I was still learning the game, I was like, what the hell? I thought, and I perceived that as, and I wanted to get to I had this story momentum. I wanted to see the next part. I was very invested. I really enjoyed the story of this game. I think it's great. But because I hit that one very specific snag that I don't know if a lot of people hit that very same one, but oh man, it just really put a damper on the experience. I had to put it down that day, then come back to it, and I still had the same issue. I had to look up what to do because I'm like, what other options do I have here? So that kind of colored the experience, and I had to try to view the game as if I didn't have that experience because it really bummed me out.
Yeah, and that was pretty early on.
Yes, but one of the benefits that I did have from learning that is that I got a much greater feel for the world, and I didn't really run into any snags later on. So you, instead of going to the fire trial, you went to the illusion trial with the god, whatever his name was.
Yes.
How did that go for you?
We'll insert the name of the god here. So the way the fire trial worked, again, you activate the totem, starts a little flame maze, you run through it, and that's the gist of it. The way the illusion trials work is there's gateways. And when you look through them, let's say, I'm looking through right now, I see a camera in front of me. But if I go over here and there's the arches, I'm looking through the arches now, the camera's gone. And so if you use your focus powers to pass through the gate, you manifest what was being seen through the gate. It's like it's a way to break the illusion.
And it puts you into that world that you see through the gate. It
Right.
materializes it.
So it's like, a bridge might be broken. You look through the gate, you see the bridge isn't broken, so you're like, okay, well, I'll activate this one by going through my focus powers. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention enough, but I got so lost where I was thinking I was getting everything. I was seeing how it worked. I got a grip on it pretty early on.
Of how the arch works?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I got really, really, really lost, and I had to look up help on probably halfway through. I was just I don't know how I'm fucking missing what I'm supposed to do here.
Yeah. That's interesting because I feel like we both had these experiences early on that we almost had to experience so that we would get into the correct headspace for the rest of the game.
It helped me to pay attention a lot more.
There was only one part where I was like, what? And then I had to reassess where I was at. But you also mentioned that maps and kind of memorizing stuff spatially isn't always your forte in games.
No, not at all.
Which is fine.
Yeah, it's fucking fine.
It's fine. I think that's something that I've spent so much time playing open world, Elder Scrolls games, that mapping out a dungeon as I go through it is second nature to me. It's something that I always do pretty much in any game. So I didn't really struggle with that part too much. But it's very interesting to me that we both had that kind of what the fuck experience at the beginning that then got us into where we needed to be to continue the game.
Yeah, I would say after that, the game was pretty much smooth sailing. I mean, obviously I had some difficulty with parts, but it wasn't confusion.
Yeah.
It was just oh, this is a little difficult. I know what I need to do. I just gotta keep going.
So as the game progresses, you complete those 2 trials.
And each one ends in a boss fight.
The ends in the boss fight.
I thought the flame boss was really easy. And
flame boss I did not struggle with.
But the illusion boss, I really struggled with.
That guy gave me a hard time.
Yeah.
The flame boss, he acted kind of just like a hit sponge. He's very slow. I'm sure if you got hit by him, he did a lot of damage.
Yeah, I was able to just kind of roll, dodge around him and just...
I am going to attack.
But
no.
But the illusion boss had way more varied attack patterns.
Yeah.
He had some attacks I just had a really hard time dodging at all. Then the big issue for me was that I got up until the very end of the battle where I think you need to focus at the end to kill him.
I think you do, yeah. Because he blacks himself out. He uses a smoke bomb or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can't
see
him, but you can't see him.
The focus allows you to finish off the battle.
Yes.
I didn't know I could use the focus in battle, so again, I was I got pretty good at it, but I was just busting ass.
I can't imagine.
Because I didn't have that fucking, that aid in the combat, which is a huge aid in the combat.
He's really fast, and he does a lot of dash attacks, and the whole thing is that you can't hit him because he's so fast. So you need to use that focus to slow down and get the advantage on him.
Right, and so once I got that understanding, there was some heavier enemies and bosses that I just wrecked.
Yeah.
Fast.
Because you understood that that's what you had to do.
Because I understood that I had this huge boon in the focus. So just timing when you're going to use that focus, and then just unleashing a barrage of heavy attacks.
Yeah, it's kind of like you just get behind the enemy, activate your focus, and then just piss pound them with heavy attacks until they die.
But not knowing that, Jesus Christ, I was having so much trouble. I was like, wow, the boss battles are insane in this game. No. All the combat is, I'd say, about equally challenging. It's, for the most part. Obviously, the fire boss was easier to me of the first 2, but still, Jesus Christ.
Towards later in the game, I think I alluded to this earlier, having that auto difficulty set, I got to a point, I don't know if this is intentional, but I think the better you do in combat, the less you die, the less damage you take, the higher that difficulty goes up. I think that's, I'm assuming that's the metric, how many hits and how quickly you do.
They did that in Max Payne as well.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so you're familiar. They got to a couple points that it just continued spawning enemies during some combat sections where I was like, Jesus! I'm like, is this enough guys? And I think that was happening to me because that auto setting was turning up because I was doing okay at fights.
I don't think so.
No? Because
I actually turned mine down.
I did too.
Halfway through the game, and there was still sections where there was just dozens of guys.
There was one without getting into that section just yet, there was one section where, like, no matter what I did, they just kept coming, and I was okay with
Well,
it. But I
ended
eventually, no, I died, and it sent me to the beginning of that interaction. But the second time I did it, there was like a third as many guys that stopped, and it allowed me to continue going. That's why I think the combat thing was. Maybe it's broken in some sections or something. Like it just has like maybe it just keeps going up.
Did you turn down the combat in between
after
those?
that, I turned it down to
After
easy.
you finished it, or
After that part, yes.
Huh. Strange.
Not
Well,
in between. It was very odd.
So once you defeated both bosses, you open the door, which is a bridge to hell. And as you make your way through that area, you are confronted by Hela.
You are.
And she kicks your ass.
She beats you silly.
And you go to swipe her with your sword breaks, you're fucked. You're thrown, and that's where you wind up on shore. You wake up on like a beach, and you're basically shipwrecked. You're around a bunch of shipwreck. Like the bridge collapses, and you have no weapon anymore.
Yeah. Fortunately, there's no combat there's no combat scenarios that happen. So there's okay that you don't have a sword, but whatever.
There's now a large section of the game where there is no combat, but there's more complex puzzle trials, and there's 4 different trials in this area. Do you remember what they are?
Yeah. Wait for it. There is a kind of sword inside of a hollowed out tree called Grammar.
Yeah.
And
it's a weapon strong enough to defeat Hela. So there's a labyrinth, a tower, a swamp, and then the blindness trial.
Yeah.
So in each one, there are these lore stones that you activate that I believe it's Druth telling the story.
Yes.
But I could be wrong about that.
I believe it was, yeah.
So he's basically telling you the story of different gods. He's either talking about his story or different parts of Norse mythology as it pertains to the area that you're in at that moment.
Yes,
and you find those stones throughout the whole game.
The lore stones, yes, that you focus in on them, and it tells you Druth narrates a part of a story of Norse mythology. That's what I was confusing it with, because he tells the story of how Odin found something, or to acquire an ability to impress somebody, he gouged out his own eyeball. And I think that parallels to the sequence where you can't really see anything, that one of the trial where you're blinded. But those trials also are sections of Senua's life that I think she really lived. Or maybe I'm crazy?
And so this is another part of the game where the storytelling is murky to me, because you have, and it's told out of order, and I'm okay with that sort of thing.
That's fine,
I like when games are non-linear in their presentation.
Sure.
Especially in an interactive medium, sometimes a non-linear narrative works better, because you're not always getting the information in a linear, like you're not always experiencing things linearly.
It's more organic almost.
Yeah,
sometimes.
it can be. So
it's done well.
You have what you're literally experiencing in the game. You have what the voices are telling you. You have your flashbacks. You have what the lore stones are telling you. You have what your conversations with Druth are telling you. And then you have just other hallucinations.
The other voices,
it's all telling a story, and sometimes it's telling your story, sometimes it's telling what's happening right now, sometimes it's telling Senua's history, sometimes it's telling Druth's history, sometimes it's telling Dillion's history, sometimes it's telling just different stories from Norse mythology, and it's not always clear what's what, and it does all kind of blend together into, I think, because we also do see flashbacks where basically Senua's father was very ashamed of her.
Yeah, and his wife, Senua's mother, because she had the same affliction.
Yeah.
She also had what we're referring to as the psychosis. She heard the voices, and
I don't think her mother was ashamed of her.
No, her mother wasn't. Her father, father was ashamed of
her
Senua
and her mother.
And her mother,
Yeah, and so he basically locked her up, and it was very abusive.
I believe he murdered her mom too. And they lied to her, or they sent her out on her own, like they communicated her from the town or something, because it alluded to her. Because you see, right in the beginning, I remember it was one of the first things that I saw. There's like a little waterfall or like a stone as you cross a little tiny bridge. I think before even that first combat
You see your
scenario,
mother's face.
You see a face, and I think that was, I don't think you could focus in on that one. I think I tried to, but that was before that mechanic worked. But you see these faces of your mother in different areas of the game, in different like terrain. One of them was at the top of a building.
And you talk to him.
Yeah, and it plays a little cutscene where Senua speaks to her mother. And I believe through that, it divulges that Senua's mother, like she had the same affliction, and I think they killed her. And they lied to Senua and told her that her mother is with the gods now.
Mm-hmm. I didn't necessarily pick up on that, but yeah. I believe you. The other thing they lied to her about was like saying that like any, that she was cursed, and that any misfortune that was falling upon her and her clan or her village was her fault.
Yes, that was ridiculous.
So that's why she was kind of exiled, basically.
Yeah, she was a shut in. And I remember it talked about how. Oh, it's so muddy. I would challenge anybody that's like, these guys even play the game? Like, they don't even seem like they know it.
I know a lot about it.
So do I.
It's just very hard to parse out what's what, because it is told in such a haphazard way where it's like, there's not... It would even be different, like, if it was just... If a different voice was doing the lore stones.
Yeah.
But the fact that Druth is, like, giving you all sorts of different narration and exposition... I get it. He's like your imaginary friend. He's your Harvey.
Yeah.
But it's just confusing. And I know it's supposed to be confusing, but at some point it's like, okay, but I really don't understand entirely what's going on. It's a game where I had a grip on a bunch of different stuff.
Sure.
And never felt like I was pulling it all together into one cohesive image.
And I think like the counter argument to that is that, well, that's how it's supposed to be, and so be it if it is. That's just our experience.
Yeah, but at the same time, at the end, it seemed like Senua... Well, she hasn't... Well, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
It seems like you should be able to make sense of it, because it seems like she makes sense of it. Maybe she doesn't make sense of it so much as she just comes to terms with it.
It does seem like it has a opening... It seems like it has a closed ending. If that makes sense.
No, not at all. Oh,
well, not the very end. I mean the conclusion to Senua's story...
She lets go of her grief.
I guess I'm trying to say that it like...
Let's talk about the end when we get to the end.
All right.
Essentially, you need to get these 4 trials done so you can pull out this legendary sword. Grammar.
Yes.
G-A-R-M-R.
It might have just been Graham. I think it was Grammar. They said it different ways. Different people said it different ways. But yeah, so you have to go through those challenges. I don't remember them all that well. I remember the one that you can't see. And the story, the dialogue that's going on is that you're Senua, obviously, and Dillion is also, if you're confused, it's not Dylan, it's Dillion, D-I-L-L-I-O-N. We're not just saying it weird. He's guiding you through this darkness, and you're in you're in the wilderness. You have to cross some water, and eventually these monsters show up that you can. And the game screen isn't black. It's very dark.
There's a little bit of light, but it's essentially like a stealth section.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to. There was a lot of feedback and the vibration of the controller to like indicate like, whoa, don't go there, or like this is the.
I think it's pulled off really well. It's essentially, you have extremely limited visibility, and you just need to make your way through a maze and then through a bunch of obstacles. Most of them being enemies.
I'm remembering the other ones now as well, and one of them, I believe, you had to use your ears, and you had to listen in stereo audio to where you were hearing something, and you would look in that direction. Your controller would vibrate, and that would be the correct way to go. Mm-hmm. Can you remember the other ones?
I can.
What were they?
So there was the labyrinth.
Is that the one where you had to choose left or right?
It was like
That's vague.
Yes, in a labyrinth, you have to choose a lot of different directions.
You got to choose a lot of different ones. Is that the one where you had to find
the tower kind of sort of thing? You just had to go through a big labyrinth and make your way through this maze. Mm. And then there was the tower one where you basically were time traveling.
Oh yeah, between the light world and the dark world, looking through the mask.
Yeah, it reminded me of Myst.
It did remind me. It reminded me of Myst as well. I'd like to take a quick second to mention that when we got to this when we got to this point in the game, it felt pretty slow, man. Like, I don't know about you, but my hand was super glued to the run button, because I just felt like I was moving so slowly through this world, and I know that's realistic, and I know it's pacing, but like, man, it really felt like a drag at some points, especially on those moments where in that puzzle where you'd have to like, you go to this one side and you open the box, and then you have to go around to the other side, enter the dark world, come all the way around again, and then open the box on the other side.
We should be a little more clear about what we're talking about. So there, like the puzzle you're talking about in specific, one of these trials, there's these large masks, and when you look through the masks, similar to the way you were using the gateways in the illusion trials,
it transports you to this other version, like a time travel.
Yeah, it seems like it was before the land was ravaged by whatever, whether that's Senua's curse that ravaged that place is kind of what it seems like to me.
Yeah, or war.
But there's like there's a peaceful, kind of like well-kept version of it, and then there's like a decrepit, war-torn, like beat up version of the building. So like maybe parts of a wall might be missing here, or a gate that was shut is now open. So you need to use the masks to kind of just navigate through. And so it's a switch puzzle.
You go back and forth. Yeah.
To progress, you need to flip the switch, do the thing, come through here, flip the switch, do the thing.
You begin in the decrepit world, and you jump back to it's brighter, it's nicer. And I remember that when you do that, all the voices, I think they're like, "Oh, I like this place." They're all happy and nice. And there's a couple moments of like brevity that are nice in the game, and they're usually quickly and abruptly you're brought back to reality. But those little brief moments are nice. So in that puzzle, man, like I really feel for the second half of this game. Even though I was enjoying it, I was just like slamming.
I'd say this is the middle third.
The middle, okay, like slamming that sprint button because I just felt very slow, and I know the experience is to draw it all in, but the story gave me momentum. It's similar to like The Last of Us, where I'm like, oh my god, like don't make me fight, guys. I need to know the next part of the story, and it almost was like the gameplay I was getting in between that. And I know a lot of that's just me. I have to like.
Yeah, I don't know how much
understand.
You love, just puzzle solving.
Yeah, I can
combat.
like it.
The fact there was no combat for, essentially what was an entire third of the game, it was a little bit of a drag.
Even not that I need combat, but just something to break it up.
Yeah.
This section, and then I believe there's some. It was punctuated by a little bit of finding the runes every now and then. Mm-hmm. I really started to hate that mechanic, man. Like, especially if I was having a particularly hard time finding the shapes. I think that the worst offender for this was the next section that we get to after this. But like, man, it just wasn't fun to me to see every time I got to a door, and it starts with just one. The very first door you do, it only has one rune. But as you progress, it gets to doors taking a maximum of 3 runes that you got to find, like you said, the physical depictions of. Mm-hmm. And it just got kind of boring to me, man. I was like, I don't want to look for the P shape in the window. It's almost all of them. Spoiler alert! Almost all of them. It's not really a spoiler. Are in the building, like in the structures that are around you, and it'll be like a wall is broken and it's in the shape. And it's just, I just didn't like that. What did you think? Did it get old for you?
Did it get old for me?
I don't think it's bad, but I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to be doing this anymore.
Here's what I'll say. It was okay.
Yeah.
It was just all right.
I felt like the rune thing, it never really grew. It was just, find the rune.
No, it grew. There were times where you had to change things in the environment to be able to see the runes. It wasn't always just a perspective puzzle.
But around this time, and I remember specifically in the Switch puzzle that we were just talking about, maybe that was the first time it happened, you'll see these sections of the world, they're like weird chunks that don't really seem to make sense.
It's almost as if it was like a puzzle.
Like fragmented?
Like a jigsaw puzzle. And so you have like 4 or 5 pieces where they were all just fragmented, and just a little bit out of place.
But you can't manipulate them. You have to get yourself into a position.
You have to get yourself into the right position to use your focus to kind of bring them together.
Yes, that's a better way of putting it.
So depending on your visual perspective, you can join them.
Yes.
And sometimes you need to find a new perspective, a new perch, a new area to be in for each one of them to join them all together.
There were a couple of those puzzles in Resident Evil 7. Village. Remember that?
Nope.
It was like you'd have an object that you'd have to manipulate that was casting a shadow with a light, and you had to match it to the shape of whatever it was. You had to do that a couple times in Resident Evil 7. I don't think you did in Resident Evil 8. This got old for me, and I don't think that makes it a bad game, but I at those moments, especially when I couldn't find them and it was taking me a long time to find them and go back to the places that I couldn't remember if I had been to before, I was bummed out. I was like, I want to know the story. I'm this badass Viking lady, and I'm looking for shapes. That clashed for me a little bit, but I don't think it's a bad game because of it.
It's a bit of a drag when the thing is, I gotta solve a puzzle, I can't quite figure it out, and a lot of games will have parts like that, but they're interspersed with a lot more varied gameplay, more action sequences. This had, some puzzles that are like some of the more frustrating Resident Evil puzzles. Yeah. Like you're making a direct, allusion there, where it's like, if Resident Evil was nothing but a series of like, you fight a couple bosses and then you do like 3 hours straight of puzzles, I don't think it would be as successful.
Yeah. And this is a much shorter experience. But I noticed it enough to mention it.
I think it has to do with how things are spread out.
Yeah.
There's
having that tightly packed puzzles only, no other stuff to break it up.
Yeah.
It wore on me. Even though it was a short experience, I was just like, oh man, like something else. I wrote in my notes, like I was begging for new mechanics. I got to the point where I was just like, man, I really hope something new happens. But
nothing happens.
It's pretty much just those 3 sequences that you said from the beginning. So you complete the 4 trials.
You get the sword.
Which is a cool cutscene. I thought it was a very cool cutscene. All the cutscenes are very good and cool.
Now we've got our big sword. We pull the sword out, and we're gonna make our way to Hell. To get there, you need to cross a sea of corpses, which is basically another, series of trial and rune fights,
but focusing on combat, right?
But there's a much harder focus on combat. Now you've got your big bad sword. It seems like you have that sword is definitely stronger than your previous sword.
Yeah, you're able to tear down enemies a lot quicker,
and so
or noticeably quicker, I should say.
As you're going through this, there's a beast called Garm, or it also seems like it's a manifestation of Fenrir, the dragon that is mentioned a lot in the mythology sections in the lore stones, and he is a giant dog beast that feeds on your fear, and you need to run into the light to protect yourself from him, and eventually you do just have to go full on and battle him. And the first time I battled him, I was fucking up.
Yeah.
Really bad. And then I think this is the situation where I actually brought the combat down, because I remember, and I could probably show the footage here.
Is that the footage?
I'm gonna put it up there.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
No one can see that.
Fine, I'll move it then. I wrecked him so fucking fast the second time. I was like, oh, should I have turned the combat down?
I was gonna say I stomped him, but I already had the difficulty onto easy mode.
It was nothing. I felt like I a little bit cheated out of an actual battle.
I feel like I just kept hitting the button and he died.
Yeah.
I would. A lot of the fights, and I know I set the difficulty to easy, but I wasn't really super interested in the combat. A lot of the fights did kind of boil down to slam the X button, dash away when you see that they're attacking, slam the X button, and they're dead.
But it's an impressive little battle, and everything along the way still continues to look really good. But then eventually you're in Hell, and you see that there's a bridge you need to cross to get to Hela.
Yes.
And this is where we have yet another one of those weird jigsaw perspective puzzles. You need to put the bridge together. So you finally construct the bridge, you get on the bridge, You're getting your way to Hela. You can tell you're very close, but you are swarmed by every type of enemy in the game.
All 5 of them.
Yeah, and so there's only 5 types of enemies in the game. There's the first one, which is just a basic swordsman.
Swordman.
There's a guy with a shield.
Shield guy.
Who you can't hit, but you have a kick move that you almost never use aside from interacting with this guy.
I don't think I ever did, except for just to experiment, but it was never really viable.
Once I realized that, you just kick his shield and his shield goes down and he's stunned.
Yeah. He takes a lot of damage, but in addition to that, you have like Hammerman, who is pretty much like Swordman, but a little bit more powerful. Then you have the Berserker guy that has the 2 axes. That's very similar to the Illusion boss.
Yeah.
Those guys, that was the guy that I had the hardest time with, those
Me too.
enemies. And last but not least, you have the big motherfucker who has the larger weapon. I think it was an axe. He was slow, and he's very similar to Surt, the fire god.
Yes. And so you go through a big trial where you're fighting all those guys. Eventually you do make it through, and then you're there face to face with Hela, and you're in another sort of circular combat arena area.
And they're just spawning forever. And Hela's throwing shit your way too. She's like stunning you and stuff. But it pulls a Halo Reach on you.
Oh, I don't think I've played through enough Halo Reach to know what you mean.
Well, Matt, at the end of Halo Reach, you're the lone soldier, you're the lone survivor of your squad, and your objective changes from, get to the next waypoint or whatever to just survive. And I think your HUD kind of like turns off and you just play until you die.
Oh, well.
It's actually really fucking cool. And this did a similar thing.
Yeah, it's similar, yes, but not in the sense that you don't play until you die. You have to willingly give up.
Really?
I guess you don't have to willingly give up, but that's what you're supposed to do, is you're supposed to realize that the only way to end the battle is to stop fighting.
Oh, okay. That was lost on me.
Did you just die?
Yeah, I busted ass. I was on easy, so whatever, but it's a very difficult part. I was like, I'm doing all right. I was doing okay.
Eventually, someone tells you as much that, hey,
okay,
let it go, Senua. What the fuck? You've been fighting for so long.
I probably interpreted that as one of the voices being like, trying to get me to give up, and like, fuck you, I'm gonna keep going.
Well, ultimately, that is how you end the game. You give up, and then you realize, like, wait a minute, I was making all this shit up. I'm not cursed. I don't, like, Dillian's dead. I can't do anything for him. And also, Hela, fuck her. She's powerless over me.
Yeah.
Like, you realize that all the lies and all the insecurity, that it's all worth nothing. And that, in the end, Senua feels empowered and she isn't cured of her psychosis, but she comes to terms with her situation, and I don't remember what she calls the voices that she hears. There's a term for them.
I don't think I remember either. But she refers to them as?
I thought so. The Fae or something?
Maybe.
I really thought there was a term for... Either way, they're like, well, we can journey together, and like they are harmonious with her, instead of being like, throughout the game, like, sometimes they're encouraging her, other times they're taunting her, or just shit-talking her, or purposely trying to confuse her.
There's a lot of little cutscenes where when she has breaking points, she will yell at them, and not confusingly, but interestingly, that seems to shut them up for a little bit, too.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like hinting that she does have this power to have her own agency and be empowered, like you said, to, choose how she wants it to go. She can reserve herself to accepting her stake in life and continuing on that way. And I think that ending cinematic, where it shows, because Senua, she has the struggle. She tries to offer her life for Dillian's when she's communicating directly with Hela, which it's very long and very intense. And Hela is scary. Do you remember? That was a really scary model. She has this really cool scene where I think it appears as if Senua has been killed, and then Hela grabs Dillian's head and drops it over the edge, seeming to signify that he is now free, or whatever that means. And then as the camera pans back up, Hela has turned back into Senua, and you realize that it was her the entire time. Yeah. Feeding into what you said about how she...
And Hela's corpse kind of fades away, and...
Yeah.
you realize that, yeah, she always was in control, and that she's conquered her demons, or at least made peace with some of them. It's not like a, oh, I'm better now situation at the end,
she's definitely like it. It acknowledges that the voices, the psychosis is still there, but it is not a curse, and she's not, worse than anybody else.
She's not. She's not doomed, and she's not poisonous.
But I believe in one of the, I think it was in one of those trials, it shows a cutscene where Dillion turns on Senua because I believe his father died of the plague that the village was attributing to Senua's curse being brought on them. So he turned on her, and he was saying some really harsh stuff. And then later on, he recanted what he said and kind of acted like he never said it, which was confusing. But then maybe that's part of the
he did never say it.
Yeah. How did Dillion die?
Oh, Dillion was.
Was he actually taken by raiders? Because it seems like their village was raided as well.
Yeah, it seemed like some sort of slave traders took him and used him.
No, that's Druth.
That was Druth's. Like when you go out and you see those remains spread out, that's Druth's remains.
No, I believe that was Dillion's, but Druth has the story about how maybe it happened to both of them. Druth's backstory was that he got
he was like a forced soldier, wasn't he?
Yeah, and then eventually he escaped.
Yeah,
and I think he murdered some of his people, the people that were responsible for his torture or whatever that would be. But so yeah, it showed Dillion's remains at one point, but yeah, was he just captured and killed by raiders?
I thought that was basically it. Yeah,
because it was in hell, in that first area before you even go deeper down.
See, these are the parts of the story where it's I took it all in, but it was hard to really understand.
Yeah, I don't feel confident on how Dillion died, but I do believe he's real. I believe he's real.
Yeah,
person.
I don't doubt that at all.
But I don't know. Maybe there's a critical element that we missed. I'm always leaving myself open for that, but I don't know how he died.
No, and even when I've gone online and I've read summaries of the plot, they're all kind of different, and they all skip certain parts. You know what I'm trying to say? It's
in favor of creating it.
Everyone, yeah.
The narrative
it's like
perceived.
Well, wait, what about this other thing I saw? Why can't I find a summary that mentions that? It's I think that a lot of people, just in my own research for this video, seems like a lot of people have a bit of an abbreviated understanding of the plot because there is so much information that can be hard to kind of make sense of.
We're experiencing that right now with us just trying to retell the story as we experienced it.
So regardless, the game between I'd say 7 and 10 hours for the average player.
Yeah.
I could see you going through much quicker if you knew exactly what you were doing.
Sure.
I really thought it was just okay. It wasn't bad. I'd give it a C+ as an overall experience where it's the visuals were amazing, really incredible looking game, and it was exciting to see new areas and everything, and it continued to innovate visually throughout the game, I thought. Where new regions were unique. It seemed like there was a lot of really great attention put into not just giving it okay, well, we have our modular, this type of building and this type of tree, and
it felt like every set was unique.
Yeah, it was a real place.
Yeah, not reused assets.
But the gameplay did not offer that. And like I said earlier, there's only a few enemy types. Could have stood to at least have different skins. So there's maybe 2 different visual variations of enemy type A,
Even
you would do
done a lot.
Any beat 'em up from the 90s will have the same guy but different color swap, palette swap on the
Bimmy and Jimmy.
Yeah. It's not that hard to do. It's it's a thing that games have done for decades because it makes sense if you got one sprite, and these aren't necessarily sprites, but you got one character model. Just if you're gonna keep reusing it, just change it slightly.
Take the hat off one of them.
Yeah.
The design of them was cool, though.
Really cool.
None of them
they all look
heads.
badass.
None of them have heads or faces, really. Did you notice that? They all had these weird like wicker and wood, like almost like effigy constructions where they had clearly human bodies, but like they had these other elements that they made work. Like the main enemy has like a weird like deer head almost.
Yeah,
Made
it
of,
all
like,
feels
sticks.
like it all feels very like weird scarecrows.
Yeah, but it was very very well done. I'm trying in summary for me, that had a lot of little things. Like there was a couple times that in battle, if there's a guy that spawns behind you, like we mentioned before, the voices will say behind you, and that's like your cue.
Yeah,
Instead of having like some games that'll like there'll be like a highlight ring and you'll be like, oh, behind me. Sometimes that happened and like I just still get hit because they would happen concurrently. They'd be look out behind you as I was getting hit. And I'm like,
yeah.
okay.
There were times where I felt like there were cheap hits where I was like, I got pretty good at the combat, even on the higher difficulty level, and still like there were times where I was like, well, there's no way I could have avoided that because I didn't know that they were there until I was told they were there, and I immediately reacted, still missed it, and it was the kind of thing where, because the combat is focused on the lock-on mechanic, I couldn't see them.
Yeah, and I found so you are permanently locked in, but like I said, with the right stick, you can switch between enemies. That didn't work how I wanted it to a lot of the time.
No, that was very awkward.
Yeah, unless they were like two guys in front of me and I could get left or right, it seemed like it was confused as to where it wanted to go.
But basically, through most of the like more difficult combat, I would just like focus on taking out the smaller guys first, and then using my focus power to just slam the big guys
for sure,
and not have to deal with them, because getting swarmed by them was almost always too frustrating.
Yeah. I would say there's a couple other experiences like that it's not really worth talking about, where it's just a little like there's invisible enemies sometimes where they were like literally mostly invisible. Anyway, factoring all of those smaller things that's not really worth talking about, and that pretty negative experience I had in the fireplace in the beginning, I think about the same. I thought the game was pretty okay. I think it may have worked a lot better. Like what I always think, and I see a lot of people saying this, might have worked better as a short film. Because I really like the story, but they'd have to strip away a lot of the extra stuff that you can only experience in an interactive video game.
I don't think so.
You don't think it could work as a short film?
It's because
I feel like you could watch a compilation of the cutscenes and like get a majority of the story.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be interesting.
No?
Personally, I don't.
I thought the story was cool. I
thought the story was cool, but I think the reason the story was cool is because you were experiencing it firsthand, and you be like having so much of it is the presentation, like the voices and everything. Like
that does add to it.
You know what I mean? It's very unique. I don't think it would work as well. There'd have to be so many special effects to like simulate the psychosis.
Just do the voices. You can just do scenes where like you just watch her like struggle like and like trip, and then like she'll never make it. Just stuff like that.
Yeah, I just don't think it'd be as effective as like being stuck with them like you are in the game.
Yeah, it was very cool.
It's very immersive.
Yeah.
And I think obviously yes, it could be, but I don't know if it would work better. I think it would almost work better if it was just a shorter game. And it's already short.
It is,
but it does feel like, it just feels like you played the same game 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
The first trials, second trials, third trials, it never felt like anything was like, aside from introducing new enemy types and also keeping the same enemy types from before, it never felt like it was like progressing towards anything new. It was just kind of like, here's all our cards, here's all our cards again.
Yeah.
And then one more time. That's why
this time they're spicy.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, it was good, but it gave you everything so quickly that it made progression feel like it wasn't actually happening almost.
Maybe that is why I felt like it was so slow and dragging at some points, because it was the same stuff just over and over again in a way that felt very samey.
And there wasn't really any reward other than like the progression of the story. In games, there's like little tricks you can pull on the player, like collecting coins in Mario or something. Yeah. It's like, yeah, you get a 1-up, but I mean, like, it's like even just like little things to interact with, like little blips and bloops, like
a little mini meter that fills up.
Yeah,
It's nice to
it's
fill
just
up
like-
a little mini meter.
Yeah, stuff that like kind of like keeps you distracted, you know, like even if there was like little destructibles in the environment or something, like just anything to like kind of like just give you something to fuck around with during the parts where nothing is happening.
I took a note saying that exploration is not rewarded.
No. Well, there's the lore stones. You find those. That's all you find.
That feels a little bit bare minimum to me. And if you're not interested in Norse mythology, I didn't really, at least I got a good amount of them because I did search for them.
Yeah, I got most of them.
Could. They didn't always directly relate to the story. They were just kind of their own little neat supplemental thing. But I guess that you could argue that they inform the story by providing you more context of Norse mythology and the gods. But that didn't feel like that played it. You only pretty much deal with Hela.
Felt like I could have not touched any of them and felt about the same about the game.
Yeah, it
But
would have been cool to have a little bit extra.
It's still good. I would say if you're curious about it, give it a shot. If you like the first part of the game, you'll like the rest of it.
Yeah,
Might get a little sick of it.
I would recommend it still, even though I had a pretty rough time with this. Like at one point when I was in the thick of dealing with the Surt, the fire god thing, I remember messaging you and I'm like, dude, I don't know if I can get through this.
Yeah.
I was that like baffled at that moment. Also, it's a little bit hard to recommend a game after we just talked about all of it, but if that sounds cool, I really think you should try it out. I mean, the most you lose is 8 hours.
Yeah, I'd say it's unique enough that I think somebody could really love it.
For sure. And I think it's worth taking that risk.
There's a sequel coming out.
There is Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice 2.
Yeah.
I think it has a different subtitle. I haven't looked into it yet. But I know at the end of this game, it's not a post-credit scene, but it's after, Senua's story is wrapped up. She speaks to the camera, and she says something like, "That was Senua's story. Now we must tell yours. Follow me." And then that's the end of the game. And quick note here, the outro song?
I hated that
What the
song.
hell was the outro song?
I'm begging you, please. Oh, please don't leave here. I don't want you to change.
I think it's just music that they like.
Yeah, I do too.
Corny.
very
Wicked
corny.
corny. I mean, no offense. I'm a songwriter too. Maybe you think my shit sucks.
Same here.
Thought it was mad corny.
but
I didn't like it. I didn't like the production or the song. I thought
didn't feel
it felt very
congruous.
weird.
The rest of the OST was like theatrical and like nuanced and subtle.
Yeah.
But like this was like, it
Yeah.
was a little jarring to me. Anyway,
I will say also corny to me is the trailer for the new game, which
do you want to watch it and then we can talk about it? Is it short?
it's several minutes long. I'll
well,
basically say, we'll watch it on our own time, but to the viewer, if you haven't seen it, it's basically, it reminds me...
Senua's back in a new adventure.
Do you know the scene in Beetlejuice where they all start uncontrollably singing that song and dancing
Yeah.
and stuff? It reminds me of that, except like it almost seems like Senua is possessed, and so it's making her like beatbox really hard.
Ooh, is it musical? Is she?
Oh yeah.
This is a weird prank you're pulling on me. Is that
No,
really a trailer?
it's like it reminds me of David Drainman.
Really?
Yeah.
Doing like
like a weird mix of the guy like David Draymond's the singer of Disturbed and Jonathan Davis. It's like a weird mix of the two singers of Disturbed and Korn to me, mixed with that sort of possessed
droning,
Droning.
like jaw harp, like
yeah, it's fucking it.
There was some like
It
chanting
rubbed me the
stuff.
wrong way.
There was some chanting stuff in Senua in the original in the soundtrack that I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I thought the sound was great. I'd say everything about the game, on its own, so nice, so polished, presentation wise. Everything looks so good.
Yeah.
It's just when you put those pieces together, does it hold up into a full game experience? Mostly, but
Mostly.
it's not something I'd play twice.
All right. Well, is that all you have to say about Senua's Hellblade Sacrifice Revenge?
I will say, did you watch the supplemental material documentary that came with the game?
I meant to. I was going to do that actually before we started filming today, but I was working on another video and I forgot.
Well, I'll say to you guys, there is like a 15-20 minute doc that is narrated by one of the creators, and they go very deep into the creative process of the game,
We recorded the actors using a
top to bottom. Like, they show a lot
I
of
think
it.
it was like half an hour long.
Might be.
It is on YouTube as well, but it's built into the game.
Yeah. So they went to great lengths to involve people who suffer from psychosis to make sure that they were as accurate as possible in their depiction of it and not doing it as some token gimmick. And they understood, like, the weight of the material.
Right.
You know, and it's risky to go, how about a game where the protagonist is severely mentally ill? I mean, that's been done before.
Like risky in a political climate stance? Or just like...
Yes, one in a way where people could just be very offended, but also in a way where it's like, oh, cool, they're crazy. What are
That's
they,
rough.
unpredictable?
That's-
You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's
man.
like, it's like that character's been done a million times.
There's so many things that are like that that I'm like, I can't get into this. I don't care.
Or just
You're-
games where
you're the
it's like-
Joker. Whoa.
Yeah.
You're crazy. He's the Joker. He's crazy.
He keeps making fun of me because I have a Joker chest piece, but... Anyway.
You have the full chessboard, don't you?
Yes.
That's how crazy you are.
I thought it was almost more interesting than the game itself was to see the creative process. And
Sometimes stuff is.
the fact that the person who was doing the voice acting and some of the motion capture for the game, like, they were like, wait a minute, like, you should just be Senua. Like, we should model the character after you.
Really?
Because, like, she had been, doing so much stuff for already with, like, the voice acting. And, it's the kind of thing where a lot of games, up until very recently, you didn't use the same voice actor as you did face model, and not necessarily the same face model as the person who's doing the motion capture.
Yeah.
It's often 3 different people, if not 2 different people.
Because the motion capture, you typically will hire somebody who's like a stunt actor or something like, usually, or something like that, that they already understand, have experience in that realm. So there's specialists for each thing.
Yeah.
But you're saying that they after doing it for a bit, they realized that the person that they're having doing the capture should be the main focus. That would be very congruous.
Yeah, so
That's
they
cool.
modeled the character after her, and it's a great fit.
The Senua model is like almost uncanny valley. Like,
Yeah, it looks
her
great.
expressions are, I mean, most of them. Well, no, you see a full range. There's dread. There's like she's getting killed. She's happy sometimes.
Yeah, she's angry, she's scared.
It looks really good, and
She's sad.
The game is punctuated by tons of these little cutscenes where it's just Senua staring directly at the camera. She's seeing a different thing each time, but you never see what it is.
The only kind of glitch I had aside from the intro glitch was like sometimes like the camera would like go like this and I'd see inside her skull.
Ugh, really?
Yeah.
I don't think I had that happen.
Oh.
Did she have scary back of her eyeballs and like a tongue?
Yep.
Ugh.
Yeah.
That always freaks me out.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sometimes I do want to check out the little featurette because sometimes I enjoy the making of or people talking about something instead of actually doing it more than the actual thing, and I don't know why.
Well, it's probably has something to do with being dropped on your head as a baby. Anyway, that was... Yeah, I've played Senua's Sacrifice.
Matt, have you played Senua's Sacrifice?
Yeah, I've played it.
Yeah,
So
I played it too.
we've got more videos here on the channel. You can like, subscribe, leave a comment, please. We're curious what you think of Senua's Sacrifice. And we have new videos up all week long.
All week long.
And we are also live on Twitch every week. So look down below for links to everything else, and we'll see you later.
Bye.